Good evening, everybody. I'm Seth Meyers. This is Late Night. We hope you're all doing well. We want to start off tonight by saying that, as I'm sure you've heard by now, conservative activist Charlie Kirk was murdered yesterday at a college event in Utah. We're horrified by this grotesque tragedy, and our condolences go out to his family and loved ones. It should never be a matter of political ideology to mourn and to extend our fullest and deepest empathy to those who are suffering. Political violence is abhorrent and anathema to the highest ideals of this country. It corrodes us and threatens the very foundations of our democracy. The great promise of our democratic experiment is that we can engage with one another and resolve our differences through dialogue, not violence. We must hold true to that promise and strive toward it with our fullest effort, even when it feels furthest away. I would be remiss if I did not also mention that several students were shot and injured in a school in Colorado yesterday, just 2 weeks after a horrific school shooting in Minnesota that killed 2 children and injured 21 more. There have already been over 300 mass shootings and 47 school shootings this year alone. We've said this many times on this program, and we'll say it again. Gun violence is a plague in this country. We desperately need reasonable gun safety laws to stop this epidemic of tragedy and pain. No matter the identity or ideology of these perpetrators, one thing is always constant: the guns. We must make it possible for children to go to school and for everyone to engage in public debate without the threat of gun violence looming over them. 3 months ago, Minnesota Democratic lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband were murdered in their home in what officials described as a politically motivated assassination. Just last month, a man was sentenced to 80 years in prison for orchestrating a politically motivated shooting spree against Democratic lawmakers in New Mexico. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and his family were the targets of an attempted assassination in April. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband Paul was violently attacked in their home 3 years ago. One person was killed and dozens were injured. In a white supremacist terror attack in Charlottesville in 2017, a violent mob stormed the Capitol and attacked police officers on January 6, 2021. And there were not one, but 2 assassination attempts against Donald Trump. Sadly, I could go on. This rising tide of political violence will only lead to a darker and more dangerous place, and it must end. In a moment like this, it is the responsibility of all public figures to marshal their dignity and compassion and lead us to a calmer, more rational place. This effort cannot be one-sided, and it must start at the top. A Dartmouth study last year found that the vast majority of Americans across the political spectrum reject and abhor political violence. They are waiting for their leaders to join them. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And now, if you do not mind, we are going to get to our show.
There we go. I found one. Well done. So the rest of this video is going to show the majority of the left, the so-called left spokespeople who do anything but what this gentleman just did. He listed incidences that were both right and left. And he didn't try to label them. He didn't try to point fingers. He simply said, all of this needs to stop. And if we go through the list of the incidences that he listed, I think it would be fair to say that there were even a few more if we counted them up and actually tallied them. He listed a few more left incidences of political violence than right. So that is what we need to do. This is how we need to behave. Unfortunately, the rest of this video is going to show how people are not behaving. So let's get to it.
As I stated, I was being transparent with working with the public on our findings as I had them. I stated in that message that we had a subject and that we were going to interview him, and we did, and he was released.
Man, Kash Patel is doing that fancy footwork right now. He's really in it to try to save his job. There are all kinds of headlines that are reporting about the end maybe being nigh for the young Kash Patel, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who is absolutely a skillless, feckless goof in the job. Someone with no law enforcement experience.
Skillless, feckless goof, no law enforcement experience. You know, remember these slanders, which legally could even be described as libel.
Who botched the investigation into the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. They arrested a guy. We got him. Oh, and that's not the guy. They found another guy. Oh, we got him. Oh, wait, sorry, that's not.
I don't think they had 2 times that happened, but he's just exaggerating. Of course, because the so-called leftists, the downers, don't go on facts anymore. They just try to spin everything and lie.
Not the guy either. And now he's taking credit. I got 2 clips for you here just from a few minutes ago on Fox News. Now he's saying, oh, well, we cracked the case. We solved the case. The intrepid investigation skills of the FBI and the local police and our wonderful partnership, we got the job done. And they didn't get the job done. The kid talked to his dad, who turned him in. Without the family's intervention of betraying their own son, sending him off to a likely death penalty case, a death penalty sentence, we'd still be looking.
I really doubt that, because they had literal pictures of the dude. It wasn't going to be a very long process of finding out who he was. They had lots of evidence, and they did capture him in 33 hours. So are they going to give credit where credit is due when it is somebody on the other side? Of course not, because they're fucking children. They are not leftists. They are not adults. Here's the thing. He claims to be left. I'm actually the left. I'm embarrassed about this guy. And the fact that he is not embarrassed about his own behavior speaks volumes to the character of who he is. That's all you need to hear. You don't need to hear anything more.
Still be looking. So let me give you two headlines, just the headlines from the Daily Beast. And this has just been in recent days to give you a flavor for what's out there, what's being reported, and maybe what's coming down the pike for Kash Patel. Keystone Kash, I love their little nicknames. Keystone Kash kept Kirk arrest secret so Trump could spill on Fox. The investigation had placed FBI Director Kash Patel and his lack of experience under scrutiny. And it's that scrutiny that I want to talk about today. And that's also something that happened. They arrested Tyler Robinson at like 10 or 11 o'clock the other night. And then the next morning on Fox and Friends, Donald Trump announced it. They held this important information, a community living in fear. They allowed that to take place until the dear leader could go on Fox News and announce it. Here's one more headline. Keystone Kash on thin ice as insiders plot his swift exit. Andrew Bailey, the incoming co-deputy director of the FBI, is being touted as Kash Patel's eminent replacement. Now, I don't know Andrew Bailey. I'm sure he's sufficiently MAGA, so he's probably a turd and not qualified or a decent.
Okay, so again, now he's calling half of the country turds. All right, this is the rhetoric that, and this is actually mild compared to the majority of what the so-called leftists, who are an embarrassment. They are traitors to the left. They are anything but left. They have hijacked our leftist narrative. They are uncivilized goons. The words that they use to describe everyone else that doesn't agree with them are literally the words that can describe themselves.
Person for this job, but we'll have to see. We'll wait with bated breath to see what kind of a turd they put in place in replacement of Kash Patel, if indeed that's what happens. But now I got two clips for you from Fox and Friends this morning, where he is really doubling down on taking credit for something that he had no role in whatsoever. The only thing he did was show up and tell Charlie Kirk posthumously that he'll see him in Valhalla. I did a video about that yesterday, which is a dog signal to neo-Nazis and racists.
Okay, this is where I'm going to stop the video, because this piece of shit who has nothing to actually report is making a 9-minute video over one single question on Fox News, which was basically Fox News actually challenged Kash Patel, and I've hated Fox News my entire life, and it's so ironic now that some of the only place that you can get actual news reporting now is Fox. I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at. And guess why we're there? Because of you fucking downers who are a traitor to the left. You are not left. You are fucking children. You are an embarrassment to civilization. You are an embarrassment to America. That's where we're at now. Where leftists have to actually turn on Fox to get actual news. How fucked up are you that you made the status quo now? It's enraging. Anyway, so he's calling Valhalla neo-Nazis. Well, thanks very much to all the Scandinavian people, where you're calling their entire history, which is older, much, much older than the United States of America, and you're calling their entire history and ethnicity and culture Nazis. Okay, because all you do is look for ways to manipulate facts, manipulate news, so that you can shit talk people, so that you can use inflaming, inciteful, hateful words to describe anyone who doesn't agree with you, anyone on the other side, Well, what fucking side are you on, Jesse? You're not left. You're fucking down.
A white supremacist.
Yeah, they're white supremacists because he said Valhalla. You think this Indian is a white supremacist? What kind of fucking cognitive dissonance and brain malfunction is required in your head to think that? That is what the so-called left is today, because they have nothing to pick on.
So in the 24 hours after, when we were still looking for the guy, I know you posted that we got him. And that ended up not being true. You took some incoming because of that. What led to you posting that? Why did you feel so certain about it? And what do you have to say about the criticism?
No, I appreciate this opportunity.
Hey, they really challenged him there. Like, you need to answer for this. They're polite, they're civil, and they're making him answer for something that he did. Why isn't any other news network doing this? Why isn't any of these so-called left news networks doing this? Because all they want to do is, he's this word and that word and horrible and Keystone Cash. Like, what are you? You are fucking kindergartners. You are fucking kindergartners. You are not civilized adults, and you are not left. And you've infiltrated our house.
Look, as I stated, I was being transparent with working with the public on our findings as I had them. I stated in that message that we had a subject and that we were going to interview him, and we did, and he was released. The job of the FBI is not just to manhunt the actual suspect who did the killing or suspects, but it's also to eliminate targets and eliminate subjects who are not involved in the process, and that's what we were doing. Could I have worded it a little better in the heat of the moment? Sure. But do I regret putting...
Taking responsibility for his mistake. Right there, boys and girls. Right there, boys and girls, you kindergarten motherfuckers. You fucking disgraces to the left.
It out? Absolutely not. I was telling the world what the FBI was doing as we were doing, and I'm continuing to do that. And I challenge anyone out there to find a director that has been more transparent and more willing to work the media on high-profile cases or any case the FBI is handling than we have been.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown, Glenn. That was Kash Patel, the FBI.
And of course, he cuts it short. He doesn't let him fully go through the interview. He's just looking for that little bite-sized clip where he can say, gotcha.
Director being confronted about the fact that he wrongly identified initial suspects in the Kirk shooting and yet opted to break protocol and publish publicly about this stuff anyway. And you can see here that he basically doubles down and suggests that he doesn't regret putting any of this out. When he was asked about that, he said, absolutely not. So can I have your reaction to the...
No, he didn't. Now you're lying, little Brian Tyler Cohen. Now you're lying. He just said, I could have worded it better, that he took accountability for what he did, and he described the situation, exactly what happened to us, to the American people. He answered the question fully, reasonably, but that's not okay with the so-called left. That's not acceptable. Nothing that they say would be acceptable to the so-called left, because they are toxic downers. They are fascist downers. And that's why they project what they are as libel and derogatory statements to incite hatred towards those who they don't agree with, or rather towards those who don't agree with them.
The fact that this seems to be the new protocol as far as the FBI is concerned.
Brian, Kash Patel is...
New protocol? How? It is the FBI's job to investigate crimes and hunt down criminals. Throughout all of history, officers of the law have used manipulative public channels and manipulative information to try to cause chaos amongst the criminals that they are hunting. Anybody that knows anything about law enforcement knows that it is a valid tactic to leak out some false information from time to time. It is part of investigative methodologies to confuse criminals that you are hunting down. Now, they're not going to come out on the news later and tell the public, oh, that was part of our investigative methodology. They want to keep, as much as they can, secret their methodology and the tactics that they're using to hunt down criminals. But that throughout the entire history of law enforcement, they have used these tactics and methodologies. Now, you can't claim to know anything about the government and law enforcement unless you know that these are valid tactics that have existed for hundreds of years. But let's see some of these so-called leftists who are nothing but toxic downers, who want to take one little issue, one little valid law enforcement investigative tactic, which he later came out and told on the news that this was a mistake that he takes responsibility for. And who knows, maybe it was a leak of information to the public, that it was a valid investigative tactic. He'll come out and say that was a mistake, even though it wasn't a mistake when they did it, because they did it on purpose as part of their investigation. Who knows? But of course, they're going to come out on TV later and say, yeah, that was just a mistake, even though it might have actually been a directive, an investigative directive. Let's leak on the news that we have the guy captured so that the real suspect makes a mistake. Because what do you do if you are a criminal that has committed a crime and you're paying attention to the news, and then you hear on the news that they caught him, but you're actually the one that did it? Well, then you let down your guard. You let down your guard. You're like, oh, whew, they got the wrong guy. I'm in the clear now. So I'm going to go make a mistake. Like, go back to the place where I dropped the gun and pick it up. Which is literally what the guy was doing. In the text messages, he was talking to his lover, and any questions that they've asked of that person, they have been fully cooperative. The so-called left fabricates anything that they possibly can to claim and proclaim you guilty before any evidence, before any argument is made, and then it is supposed to be your job to try to prove yourself innocent. That is not the way our civilization is supposed to work. But that's the way the so-called left now works. Blame, blame, accuse, accuse. A very thin veneer of evidence to support their accusations and blame, but they do it anyway. That is what the so-called left is.
Absolutely not. So can I have your reaction to the fact that this seems to be the new protocol as far as the FBI is concerned?
Brian, Kash Patel is doubling down on his recklessness and incompetence. You know, nobody can accuse him of learning from his mistakes. And you know, this isn't a simple mistake. This is a mistake that will, I promise you, come back to haunt the criminal prosecution of the actual shooter of Charlie Kirk. But first of all, let me just read what Kash Patel posted that was dead wrong, and that was not just reckless, but it was unlike anything any FBI director would ever post, you know, when an investigation is in its infancy. He actually posted, quote, "The subject for the horrific shooting today that took the life of Charlie Kirk is now in custody, period." Brian, let me share with our viewers how that will come back to haunt the criminal prosecution in the event there is a trial rather than a guilty plea in the future. There's something called the third-party perpetrator defense. You know, particularly in violent crime cases, in murder cases, it is a defense that we see defense attorneys deploy pretty regularly. As its name suggests, the third-party perpetrator defense, the defense will try to prove that it wasn't their client who committed the crime of violence, the murder. It was a third-party perpetrator. Now, the law says that you have to have a certain amount of evidence in order.
So his argument here is that he's going to take a very verbose legal loophole that applies when there is considerable doubt on the guilt of a suspect, and they can use the investigations process and any mistakes that the investigators made as part of their defense for that suspect, alleged person. In the law in the United States, we use the word alleged when we talk about a suspect that has not yet been convicted, because under the Constitution, you cannot proclaim somebody guilty until they are proven guilty. Our system clearly states that you are innocent until proven guilty, which is why all law enforcement officers and all people working under the justice branch of our government are required by law to use the word alleged when referring to a suspect that has not yet been convicted of a crime. Now, what he's trying to argue here is that the investigative practices that they went through and the very small incident of Kash Patel coming out and saying that we caught him is going to be used by the defense to let him free. To basically say, well, the FBI doesn't know what they're doing, they're incompetent because they said they got him, but then they're saying now that this guy is actually the guilty person. That would help a defense case in a case where there is huge amount of doubt that the alleged suspect is actually the right person. That would apply in a case where there isn't sufficient evidence to definitively prove that this is the person. So what this mothball doesn't understand, because he's not inside, he's just a so-called left, toxic downer, anti-American, anti-left child who wants to sit there and shit talk anybody that doesn't agree with him, that isn't on his side, because he's a fucking kindergartner. So he's going to fabricate this argument that they can use this as a defense for the actual suspect and it will help them get free, which is absolute bullshit. Here's a theory, and I don't know any more than this fucking mothball head does either. Here's a theory. Maybe the FBI had already collected sufficient evidence, such as DNA, thumbprint, palm print, footprint, which they later revealed that they had. And then they went ahead and they said, okay, we have this evidence already. It doesn't match the suspect that we have apprehended and questioned. But we're going to say to the public that we have him because we already have sufficient evidence that when we actually do get the real suspect, it will match that person. And that will be more than enough sufficient evidence that the defense for this person won't be able to use our investigative mistake of saying that we got him when we didn't get him yet, that it won't matter. It won't be able to be used as a defense. Because when we hand over all of the evidence to the prosecutor, they will know every single step of what we got in our investigation. And they will know that we already got evidence. Maybe they had already recovered the rifle and they were staking it out. They didn't take it up. They were staking it out to see if the person that committed the crime came back to pick it up, which is what he was trying to do. He said in his messages to his his girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever you want to call him or her, that he wanted to go pick up the gun where he had stashed it. But there was a patrol car nearby that was staying where it was. So he wasn't sure if he could go over there and get it. Maybe that's actually what was happening. Maybe because of the TV footage, the CCTV footage that they showed to the public where he jumped off the roof, he crossed over into the little forested area on the other side of the road, stashed the weapon. They saw that on camera, and then they thought, okay, well, let's go check that out. They saw what he had. They decided to leave it there, stake it out, and see if the guy would come back and collect his things, including the weapon. That's a pretty good investigative practice. I'm pretty sure that that's what they did to try to catch the guy. That's what our law enforcement are doing. Isn't that what you want our law enforcement to do? Our law enforcement can't openly disclose every single little thing and every little tactic that they're doing because they need to use those techniques to capture the criminals. Isn't that what you want? It's what I want. I don't care if the law enforcement officers are fully transparent and disclose every little bit of information to me because I want to see the clicking details and I want to hear the drama. I want them to do their job. I want them to capture criminals. I don't give a shit if I am lucky enough to hear how they did it every single step of the way. I'm a citizen. I'm not in law enforcement. And I want to respect them and let them do their fucking job. But the so-called left doesn't do that. They don't respect law enforcement. How can you be so-called left when you don't want the institutions of your country to be strong and successful? When all you want to do is tear them down because you're a fucking downer. You're not left. You're a downer. That's why. And I have every justification to be angry and upset because this is my house. I am a leftist. You are not. You are a disgrace to our democracy. Let's see one more.
If I had a dispute with DoorDash.
Now, see, if I was just like the so-called left downers, I'd be sitting here and making fun of this gentleman for the way he looks and talks and whatnot. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to listen to his words and not pick on him like I'm in a fucking kindergarten.
And Kash Patel was investigating it. Would I get the credit? I imagine I would not. I imagine if there was a discrepancy on a DoorDash order, the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Kash Patel, would not be able to secure my credit of $11.90.
Well, comedian Tim Dillon isn't the only one taking some punches at Kash Patel, the FBI director, of course, and his handling of the investigation following the murder of Charlie Kirk. In fact, there's a new Fox News exclusive which alleges that, there are very high-level members of the Trump administration who are not pleased with Patel. They spoke to 10 sources across multiple federal offices who all said that Patel is under fire over his handling of Charlie Kirk's murder investigation. So one of these anonymous sources with knowledge of ongoing personnel discussion stated that the White House, Attorney General Pam Bondi, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche have no confidence in Kash. Pam in particular cannot stand him, Blanche either. Now, let's just remember that Pam Bondi kind of hates Kash Patel because of a problem that she created herself by promising the release of the Epstein files, pretending like she had the goods, or maybe she does have the goods, but then never delivering. And apparently behind the scenes, she had a bit of a scuffle with Kash Patel over that issue. So she has, in my opinion, other motivations or other motivating factors. So just keep that in mind. But we also have to be completely fair and honest here. Kash Patel did appear to bungle the investigation in the initial phases, and we'll get to the details on that in just a minute. Now, while Trump has been defending Kash Patel publicly, according to this report, privately, it's a different story. Multiple sources close to Trump acknowledged the president was not thrilled with some past episodes of Patel's performance, including a public feud with AG Bondi over the administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case.
Okay, so the Tim Dillon weird looking dude, no offense, guy, I'm not gonna be that like that. He was nasty. You know, he's taking the exact same issue that he announced that they had gotten the suspect, which, like I've described already, could have been a completely valid investigative technique. And it seemed to probably have worked, actually. Who knows? That could have been the little trick that they used that made the guy drop his cover and start confessing that he's actually the one that did it. That could actually be the story. We might find out, we might not. But that could actually be what happened. They said, we got him. So then he let down his guard and he started telling his girlfriend, oh, I'm actually the one that did it. Those words were actually in his messages to his girlfriend. So regardless or not, if that was their intent and part of their investigative practice, it worked. Because all of the messages that he started sending out to his girlfriend, boyfriend, and in his Discord came after Kash Patel went and said, we got him. Because it was in his messages that he said to them, oh, they got this other guy. And then he started talking. So for anybody that can actually think, all of you other sane, civilized citizens out there who have brains, which the people on our media obviously don't, you know, we can sit home and think through and rationalize what's actually happening with less information than they have. But they can't even get up in front of the camera and describe what I'm describing right now. Because we leftists, we citizens of the United States who are actually left, we have brain power and we can think. But these people who are downers, who are not left, they're anti-left and they're anti-right, they're just downers. They can't do what we can do. They can't think. They can't put two and two together. And they have so much more information to go off of than we do. We are the ones that need to come up and speak and be the mouthpieces of the left. Because the mouthpieces of the left that we have now do not represent us. They do not represent our ideologies. They do not represent the entire concept of the left. So, what is the point that I'm really trying to make in this video? I'm trying to make a point that our so-called left media and the spokespeople that have taken that podium are really an embarrassment to us leftists. They do not behave as civilized citizens. They're incapable of having a conversation with somebody. The media and the content that they're putting out is constantly full of nothing but kindergarten style yelling at each other. That's why it's so hard for us leftists and civilized citizens to stomach even watching them. They don't come up with any clear points. They're sitting on there constantly yelling at each other, talking over each other. They're not having a civil debate or a discussion about anything. They take small little instances where they can say, gotcha, and then use that to manipulate a complete narrative and be drama about it. I mean, they are more drama queen than my young daughter. And it is an embarrassment to us, adults who are actually left, who want to participate in our democracy as the left, when we have nothing but spokespeople out there claiming to speak for us who behave like this. And I know there are a lot of you out there that feel the exact same way that I do, and that is why I started this channel, because we need voices from the actual left, adults, civilized people, patriots, people who care about this country, who have ideas and plans for what we want to build, and we want the right to be healthy, and we want the right to be a counterpart that we can have debate and discussion with. And we are not going to be toxic. We are not going to be nasty. We are not going to throw libel and slander at them when they disagree with us. In a discussion, when you have to talk over somebody, you have lost that discussion. And this gentleman here, who is famous for getting completely red in the face and shouting, that's basically what we all know him for. Cenk the hothead. That is what we leftists view you as, Cenk. Not only are half of your views not even left anymore, you're an outright terrorist supporter, which is the exact opposite of what we leftists stand for. But you do nothing but shout and get angry at anybody that doesn't agree with you. You are an embarrassment to the left.
Are you actually going to let me talk for longer than 5 seconds?
Go ahead.
You keep interrupting me. Every time I actually try to actually explain my point and have a reasonable conversation with you, you cut me off. I was trying to explain, you cut me off, started talking about something completely different. You started bringing up random stats and random facts to try to make me look stupid.
I'm not going to say Charlie Kirk didn't do that. He interrupted people sometimes, but when called out on it, every single thing that I've seen from him, you know, he was called out on it, said, hey, let me finish my point. And then he would shut up like you're supposed to. If somebody says, hey, you're not letting me finish my point, it's your responsibility as a partner in that civilized discussion to shut up. If I'm talking to someone and they say, hey, let me have a chance to talk and let me finish my point, I say, okay, I'm sorry, because if there's nobody that's being allowed to be the other side of that conversation, and I'm not the one allowing that, I'm the one that's wrong. We civilized leftists understand that. We want to talk with the right. And this is how you talk. The so-called left, the downers, are spoiled little rotten children, kindergartners that haven't been taught. They didn't graduate kindergarten. And the so-called left adults can't do that. This is just one of the many behaviors and characteristics of the so-called left that has so disgusted us leftists, us patriotic left Americans, for so long. Well then, after waffling on all that time, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.